And a common thread in the whole diagram for all of the strategies I mentioned and more is to weaken society, to weaken history, culture, independence, nationalism, all the things that keep people relatively resilient and strong in all their different countries and independent. You want to break that down. Happy Saturday, folks. And I sat down a couple of days ago with a new connection, Christian White, who's an entrepreneur and a veteran and many other things. Great guy. And we had a big conversation covering all of what's going on across the whole world. So the stuff you really need to know. And I included graphics as well, as you've seen, to help explain everything that's going on. So enjoy 40 minutes or so getting you right up to speed. Here we go.
Welcome to Discourse with Christian. I'm your host, Christian White, and today's guest is Ivar Cummins. Ivar is a biochemical engineer, corporate complex, problem-solving expert, and YouTuber. Ivar, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Great to be here, Christian.
A lot of stuff going on in the world. I mentioned that, of course, with most of the great guests that I have, and grateful to have you on. Would love to start off kind of your current take on things, where you'd like to take it around the world.
Whoa, if in doubt, zoom out, hey? Yeah, I've traveled around the world over the last year with the Maverick organization, kind of mostly banking and investment type people who came together after COVID and realized we had a lot of challenges in the world. And they look a lot at plan Bs, like going to have domicile in Argentina or Caymans, and that's kind of their focus. I'm more a stand and fight person myself here in Ireland. But yeah, we have a lot of challenges. I was brought over to Florida last year based on a root cause diagram I did. For my complex problem solving world, we do root cause bubble diagrams to give clarity on what's going on and potential causes. And I kind of rejigged that to show what's happening in the world. And essentially in the middle is globalist utopia, I put in the middle. It's kind of paraphrasing it. It's what the ultra-rich banking elites and the globalists really want. They want a managed ant farm, I would say, in the West particularly. China already has a very well-managed ant farm, if you will. So that's what they want. And then I put all over the diagram all the strategies that are all synergistic and going towards their utopia, for them, of course. And we have the COVID program. And I have all the lines and bubbles showing what it achieved. It achieved censorship. Imagine, in 2020, we made censorship great again after, nearly a century without really having that in the West. And it also helped with profiteering for all the partners of the WEF, all the corporates, all got to profiteer. I think it's estimated now around $15 trillion passed from the ordinary and the poor to the globalist and the corporate class during COVID. So a lot of money was made there for all the partners to keep them happy. So I could go on, but also COVID gave a control structure. They created a mass formation in the people, a panic was created. And as a result, people accepted all the new crazy laws and rules and masks and, being locked down. So they moved forward the control structure, the Chinese style kind of population management. So anyway, that's just COVID in one corner of the diagram, which obviously when I described all the things it achieved, it moves towards a globalist utopia. But then we have CBDC that's on the way, the central bank digital currency, programmable. That's an enormous tool of power and control over the people and censorship, because at any given moment, your assets could freeze, your currency freezes. And if you go to your bank to complain, they'll say, well, we don't run it anymore. And they'll give you a phone number somewhere in Europe or East Coast America or Geneva, and you'll ring that and good luck getting an answer, right? So you can be switched off remotely, centralized control. And then as we go around the diagram, we have the war on farmers and all what we've seen in the last few years. And that's to kind of kick us in the legs and take away our resilience, our local high quality foods, and move us towards a corporate fake food, processed food supply chain. So we lose our resilience. You know, the climate is on there. And that's obviously an enormous power play because you create scarcity in real fuel, which drives population progress and, you know, good times. That's all based on real fuels, fossil fuels, they call them. So that's another strategy. And I won't go through the others, but you can probably get a visualization of what it does. It allows a normal person, an average person, to kind of see through all the confusion of all the madness that's going on and see that it's all coherent. And a common thread in the whole diagram for all of the strategies I mentioned and more is to weaken society, to weaken history, culture, independence, nationalism, all the things that keep people relatively resilient and strong in all their different countries and independent. You know, you want to break that down. And mass migration is another huge one. Obviously, it's a disaster in Ireland and England and, well, loads of other countries. But that weakens the culture and the history. And we're told, oh, it's out of date to be sovereign or to value your own culture. We're all one big family now. So it's a lovely message, right? But the reality is it's a very sinister strategy, the mass migration. Weapons of Mass Migration is a book published, Michael Yon told me, decades ago by a lady socialist person, and it goes through how mass migration is a weapon and it weakens societies you're opposed to. So I guess that's kind of the overview of some of the things going on. Who are the globalists? I often get asked. And the problem is if you start getting too much into Rothschilds and Wagners and Wallenbergs and the banking families, you run the risk of being called an anti-S. You know, it's a very dangerous slur that they can use as a weapon. So you have to steer clear of that, even though we'd love to talk openly about such influencers, but we can't really. I thought Michael Yon put it very well. His opinion was that there's a meta-tribe of oligarchs, and includes the Russian oligarchies, Chinese, of course the CIA deep state and all the intelligence services and the super bankers, but he loosely sees them broadly as a Zionist type kind of political forces. It's a power system and it ties closely to Zionism. And he was at pains to point out that there are more Christian Zionists than there are Jewish ones. Zionism is not Jews and it's not Israel. Zionism is more just a long-running kind of power play to control and manage the world. It's kind of a colonial thing. So I love the way he said a meta-tribe of oligarchies. You know, they're frenemies, sometimes they're enemies, but they work together. Great example is China did a solid for the Western oligarchs to help launch the COVID scam. You know, they had the falling man, welding doors shut, right? So China helped out the Western oligarchies and the WEF for the COVID program. But at other times, China may be in opposition. So Michael did a great job of explaining it's kind of complex. It's a who's who in the zoo, he said, up there. Lots of frenemy type oligarchies all vying for control of the globe. And I think that's essentially what we have.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. Michael mentioned about kind of a multi-spectrum war going on, and that it's been going on, and a lot of people are not even aware of it. I don't feel like I was awakened, and I'm just entering this alternative media space. I feel like I'm just more awakened. This started like really last summer, Ivor, and there's so many rabbit holes, and you covered so many different things that are just absolutely fascinating. And you mentioned you addressed one of the first things, which was something I've been asking people is who do you define to be kind of the head of the snake? And I know you kind of mentioned about it's kind of a transnational. Some of them are working together, some of them are not. I don't know if you care to get a little granular with that.
I would actually, and there's a diagram, and again afterwards if you want to, or I might just put on screen some of the diagrams, but there's a diagram done by a British gentleman, and I really liked it because I have always talked about the Rockefellers, Kissinger, the Rockefeller Brothers Project, Bilderberg, Club of Rome, Council for Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission, and we've got all of these super power players that have driven us over the last half century to where we are. But this gentleman Ian in UK put that strata not quite at the top of the pyramid. At the top of the pyramid, he put the BIS, the Bank of International Settlements, and the huge bankers and banking families, without getting into names. So I tend to agree with him that really at the top is banking and money. But it's more effective to focus on the Rockefeller level because people can recognize they know about the Rockefellers. They certainly know about Kissinger, very bad man. And they kind of have an idea there's a club of Rome, ultra rich guys, kind of propaganda club to push the climate stuff. Trilateral Commission and Council for Foreign Relations. Not every person knows about them, but they can Google and see they're serious organizations. So I like to focus on the layer where people can find it recognizable and geopolitical, and less kind of real bad guys up the top. But to your question, Christian, I think, yeah, that diagram is fair enough, that really at the top, and for centuries, I guess, has been big money. And the big money is countless trillions of assets. I mean, some of the big families, the numbers are astonishing for what they probably hold. And they have enormous influence with governments and various organizations from the top. So I think that's kind of somewhere up there is the top.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just going to comment. I'm reminded of something I had someone share with me a while ago, which is once you become aware of something, you can't unsee it, so to speak. It just changes how you look at the world and such. And wanted to segue. I know you mentioned immigration. Fortunate to have John Waters on to kind of unpack kind of what's going on. He's kind of mentioned how Ireland has kind of been like an experiment for the cabal, if you will, to create their world that they want. Could you share with the audience that, especially that's not in Ireland, what's going on currently?
Yeah, it's pretty grim. Now, I pride myself in staying non-emotional on all this stuff because it's very important as a problem solver and communicator. Emotion takes us down, clouds our reason. So I'm pretty hardcore on that. But I have friends who are getting very despondent, and my wife also, seeing their culture and history being dismantled in front of our eyes. And we see all the time the state media, Pravda, RTE in Ireland, basically it's just a state mouthpiece for many decades. It's astonishing. And the mainstream press as well are just mouthpieces for the government. And the government, of course, is clearly reporting and enthralled to the UN, Rockefellers UN, and the EU. The EU is pretty much a recreation of the Soviet system, but in the West. So it's unelected bureaucrats at the very top, the Commission, that run everything. And the European Parliament is the talk shop. So long story short, it's hard to watch what's happening. But a great way to start it is, there's been a push for mass migration, particularly favouring Africa. The Soroses of this world, Soros came out in 2015 and decreed that the EU would have to take millions of migrants in. Didn't explain exactly why. There was some loose narrative around your birth rate is down. A bit of a cover story, fairy story. But the real reason is to weaken and break down nationalism and sovereignty across the EU. And mass migration, particularly of very different peoples, it's no fault of theirs. The economic migrants coming in are being given loads of money and they're being told, come on over, we're open for business. Why wouldn't they? So it's nothing against the migrants. It's orchestrated from the top and funded. So Soros in 15 said you're going to have to allow, I think it was 30,000 sterling per year for each migrant, and you're going to have to bring in millions. But the whole EU, UN, the Rockefeller structures, they're pushing mass migration remorselessly. Now they have been for decades, and Ireland has seen waves before. But since 2022, there was a trigger event, the Ukraine war, right? The proxy war of the US and the globalists. And the Irish Minister for Children and Migration, or, some bureaucrat, he sent out his department a tweet basically saying to all Ukrainians in Ukrainian language, Ireland is open, come on over. Basically, you get money, you get houses, no problem. Even though Ireland had a housing crisis already and a homeless crisis, and we had no money apparently to help with that. None of that mattered. In Ukrainian, everyone come in. So you presume there'd be women and children coming in to escape a war zone. All pretty much young men, or mostly, okay? On the same day, his department sent out the exact same tweet in 8 or 9 different languages, including several African languages. So they used the cover story of Ukraine to actually tell Africa and the world, Ireland's open for business. Come on down. The price is right. And by God, you should see the graphs of migration from that time. It just went up in a hockey stick. Ukrainians, sure, but also everyone else. And the numbers are astonishing. So we have IPASS, International Protection, I think it's called. I forget the exact acronym meaning. Anyway, IPASS centres are all over Ireland. Someone did a map. They're all over Ireland, and they're building like army barracks, huge centres, simply to try and house all of this flood of migration that was asked for by Ireland on behalf of the EU and UN technocrats, who told the Irish puppeticians, as I call them, what to do. And they did it, because they know who rules the roost. And Ireland now, it's just shocking to see. I mean, the centre of Dublin, forget about it, transformed in a few years. It's just like Paris, you know the problems there, Malmo in Sweden, you know, Germany got theirs a few years ago. Ireland's now getting it in the neck, flooding us, and the centre of Dublin is unrecognisable. And again, it's nothing against the migrants, because migrants just go where people say they're going to get loads of money and a good life. Why wouldn't they? But it's the fact it's rich, ultra-rich white men, essentially, who are driving it remorselessly. That's the irony. And that, to your point, Christian, it's hard for people to see that. It just sounds like a conspiracy theory, but it's all documented. 2020 or 2000, I think it was, 2001, replacement migration, a 50-page report from the UN. Replacement migration, basically using the fairy story that we need it because our birth rates are down, which is not necessarily required at all. They say we need to bring in loads of people. And then Soros in 15, the Irish former Attorney General in 2009, his name escapes me at the moment, but he was the youngest Attorney General of Ireland. He was a Jesuit boy, became very powerful, and then became the head of Goldman Sachs, right? The head of the snake. Head of Goldman Sachs. And guess what he moved into when he dropped that role and was ushered into his next role? From the head of Goldman, he became the UN mass migration czar, essentially. And he began to remorselessly push for bringing in the world into Ireland and dumping it here. And he is quoted in a speech he gave, I think 2009, and he said, we basically have to break down this idea of nationality and sovereignty in European nations. We've got to break it down, in a speech about migration. So he actually admitted it on the record. That's what all this is about, you know. It's pretty sinister, isn't it?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. You reminded me of something. I think it was, I don't know, it was Michael Yon or somebody else I just had on, but how these people, the globalists, if you will, they'll just come out and say what they're intending on doing. It's actually pretty interesting. It's not like they're trying to be discreet about it. Like, they're very vocal about it. Like, this is, we have a population. We need to population needs to go down. We need to change the food. We need to do this. So it is very interesting as an observation. And then as far as immigration goes, it's so fascinating is just the reoccurring themes throughout past epochs. I was just listening. Somebody had a YouTube video. It was like Aristotle's like politics. It was like some summarized thing. Or I was just kind of listening to it out of curiosity, and it sure as hell a lot of the same topics. Talk about immigration. I mean, hey, I'm all about people immigrating if you do it legally, and you have to assimilate. You have to be able to speak the language. If I ever go to Ireland, I'm not going to be going off doing my own thing, especially if I have my whole family and such. I'm going to be assimilating. I'm a guest over there and such. And you obviously don't see that with people going to these other countries. Same thing over here. I'm in California. 4 hours south of me is Los Angeles. And and as far as a lot of issues there, especially with the ice raids that went on and presumably are still going on. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty grim. And Michael, in my interview with him, I think he caught that one. He goes through the US scenario particularly, and the Darien Gap, where they're flooding in the migrants, and there's hard-hitting, seriously influential NGOs down there, mass migration driving NGOs, and they are orchestrating all of that. Now, Trump has kind of stopped it, though Michael said all the infrastructure remains quietly in place. But politically, or maybe genuinely for the moment, he's taking action. And there's lots of debates around Trump. He's clearly, as Michael said, from his own words, is a Zionist. So that's not ideal. But is he only doing what he kind of has to do to keep the power brokers happy? He's just doing enough, and he's also trying to do things we might perceive as good, like stemming the flow of the mass migration. Or is he really in with the whole club, the meta tribe of oligarchs, and he's actually fooling us all? It's I get people on both sides of that argument who are all good people, like in the Maverick org. There's debates about it. He could be playing a very clever game, or he could be fooling us. It's very hard to call.
Oh yeah, and one of the things that I saw you had posted on an X account that I feel is that relates to the Trump administration, as well as a lot of them, and how we went from kind of a collective. Well, you've got the collectivist element, and then you've got kind of this mercantilist / kind of fascist kind of element. And the quote that you had from Ayn Rand: "Fascism and communism are not two opposites, but two rival gangs fighting over the same territory based on the collectivist principle that man is the rightless slave of the state." And that just stood out to me. I thought that's just a great quote from Ayn Rand.
Amazing quote. And I always, even before I saw that quote, and I put it on the front page of my pinned tweet video, where I try in 20 minutes to explain what's happening in the world, which isn't easy, but I think it's pretty good. So I pinned the tweet video. But I love that quote, because that's what I was trying to tell people. This left and right, fascist, communist, is all now nonsense. I mean, half a century or more ago, it had some coherence, it had some usefulness as terminology. It's over. The left and right doesn't mean anything anymore. All that really I could see as a separation. Are you libertarian, less government, less bureaucracy, and more freedom? Are you that person? Or are you pro-government, technocracy, rules-based society, yada, yada, yada? Now, at the moment, the left are obviously the worst for my definition. They want us under the bed wearing 16 masks, and they want speech bills brought in to shut down free speech. So the so-called left are the worst. But then there's a lot of Republicans supporting a lot of nasty stuff as well. So it's better to think of, are you libertarian, smaller government, freedom being absolutely vital, above nearly anything else? Or are you towards bureaucratic control, which is always going to bring you towards tyranny? There is no exception to that. The more power you give governments and the more rules-based society you allow, you are on the slippery slope to outright tyranny or a social credit system. You might manage to slow it down and hold it at some point, but it's very hard to take back the massive governmental bureaucracies and NGOs you've allowed to take hold. Now you've got a massive inertia to overcome. I mean, that's where we are. This is the problem. The media is gone. The NGOs, Big Pharma, and all the corporates fund the media. So we've lost the main media. The governments are all beholden now to the UN, all the way up to the globalist bankers, if you will. So we've lost many of, or most of our politicians, right? So we've got a challenge now. I believe it's all on the razor's edge. It's all to play for. I always say that message. That's honest. It's not like we're doomed, but it is the razor's edge. And the next couple of years will be enormously important that we get more people to awaken and begin, like my father, and his pals in their late teens used to write letters to the newspapers about the politics of the day. They were engaged in the issues of the day. But look around us now. Everyone's written off politics. And they've got a point, but it's very dangerous. I think it was, I don't know, Cicero or one of the greats said, the price you pay for disregarding politics is to be ruled by evil men. And that is more true now than ever, unfortunately, even though politics is so, I always absolutely had no time for politics. I thought they were idiots, nearly every one of them. But now I'm realizing by taking my eye off the ball, along with millions of other people, and getting busy with career, family, mortgage, and all the other stuff, I then wake up like to the likes of COVID and realize, we should have been watching and responding and pushing back way earlier.
It's pretty interesting how surreptitious they are with gradually rolling things out. You need a pretext. I'm reminded, I'm a big history guy. I think I remember reading something about the Romans, how they wouldn't go and attack somebody unless there was a good excuse. So then they'd find, they get very supernatural people, or they were very much into superstitious, and how you got to find a reason. And so it's interesting how you have people try and foment and poke the pot, create the problem, okay, then provide the solution. And I feel like you can see that as evident throughout, of course you're in the health space and things of that nature, and how that's used. As far as these globalists go, Ivar, would you say it is there is a, I guess for lack of a better word, a absolute intent to do harm, like an evilness, if you will, even some might call spiritual? Or would you say it's more of they are delusional in that they think what they're doing is good, and that there's different shades of it going on?
Yeah, that's a great question. Dr. Jakob Nordengard, when I mentioned the word evil in an interview with him about the Rockefellers, he stepped in and stopped me, and he said, well, actually, Ivor, of course we would see what they're doing as evil, and it is. But they don't perceive themselves as evil. They perceive themselves as masters of the universe, and the little people, and they've often said it, aren't capable of governing themselves or managing themselves. The 99% of them are just, like ants in an ant farm. And we, the elite, need to work together with all of our organizations and links to government. We need to manage these little people, in a properly managed environment. So I'd say quite a few of them believe what they're doing is just the thing that needs to be done, okay? But I'd say over the decades since the Rockefeller structures and UN have grown, I'd say it's been an absolute magnet for sociopaths. And the sociopathic personalities, like in corporates, have a huge edge in moving up the chain because they'll do anything that's required, absolutely reliable, and utterly focused on money and power and control over their own species. So I'd say the whole lot of them now are riddled with sociopaths, unfortunately. But that could cause them to overstep. On the positive side, they have overstepped on many occasions and had to pull in their teeth. We saw the really funny one, monkeypox, declared an international health emergency. Crazy, right? But Tedros overruled the technical committee of the WHO in 22 and forced it to be a public health emergency of international concern. And the thing fell on its face because the people just weren't having it. And bird flu I was worried about last year because I was watching bird flu. I knew they'd use that to kick at our legs again, our resilience, and start forcing people to not have chickens, bring in more anti-meat agenda, right? And they did bring it in, and it was in all the puppet press talking about bird flu, and they did kill millions of birds around the world, but then it keeled over, So I think there were enough people now who are getting very suspicious that are there in all levels of organizations that are beginning to ask questions as opposed to just roll along with the experts. So I think there's a lot of good signs. I mean, the Ukraine proxy war has failed, okay? You can say what you like about what you think of Russia, but Russia and Putin are just fighting for their country and their people, and probably as best they can, and they're going to be nasty about it, just like the CIA is for the America. It's going to be some people disappear or fall out of windows. That's just goes with the turf when you're running a country, 170 million people. You know, you're going to have to play hard with potential enemies. But putting Russia aside, the failure of that project has been a good thing for the planet in general, no matter what side you take, you know. And the balance now between China, Russia, BRICS in general, and the Western oligarchs seems to just have a bit more balance, and it'll keep people in check. Iran is very concerning, but again, luckily Iran didn't get a regime change, or we'd have serious problems on our hand, because Iran, Tehran is right on the Belt and Road Initiative, the new Silk Road for China and Russia and the rest. And if Iran became a problem for the BRICS, now you're talking confrontation. So it was totally insane what suddenly happened in Iran. It's just completely insane. But luckily, so far, that seems to be stabilizing. You know, there's a lot of pieces on the board, isn't there?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Now, would you say, obviously, as it relates to the West and the and BRICS, do you see things coming to a climactic head here, like kinetically? I've been, having a lot of guests on, and it seems to be the case. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's really hard to call. I mean, Michael obviously is a Green Beret and war correspondent. I'd have to defer to his opinions on a question like that. But I think a great point he made is when a war starts or conflict starts, even the guys orchestrating it, which is often, I mean, people should look up all wars are bankers' wars. It's amazing. It's from the guy who did The Creature from Jekyll Island, I believe. Forget his name now. But
sorry, G. Edward Griffin.
Edward Griffin, yeah, he's still going in his 90s, I believe. Amazing insights. But yeah, all wars are banker wars. But even the people who are orchestrating the wars, when you start one, it's impossible to tell exactly where it'll go. It's inherently chaotic. So I think there's quite a bit of restraint on all sides, knowing that fact and not wanting things to go completely nuts. Now, the question for me is will it get to the point where they're willing to go scorched earth and start a real kinetic conflict with the BRICS? I'm kind of hoping and edging towards, in my mind, that negotiation at the top, it won't be in the newspapers, but negotiations at the top, I would guess, would avoid a big, massive one. Now, there's evil people in the system up in the top who would like an apocalypse. They would love an apocalypse, and they know they'll be safe from it. But I trust that there's enough, greedy, power-hungry people, but who still do not want a worldwide apocalyptic scenario. I trust there's enough of them there to head us off at the pass. But things the next 10 years are going to be tricky, and we're going to be regularly going close to that, I'd guess. Crisis after crisis. So it's going to be very hard for the average person who doesn't understand this, who's just always feeling, oh my God, what's going to happen now? There's nothing worse, I think, Christian, than ignorance. I was told by a few people at the start of COVID, either you're bang on point on this thing and you're one of the first out publicly explaining that COVID is nonsense. However, do you not think that some people might get depressed realizing what you're explaining, that it's all a scam orchestrated by our own puppeticians up? That might be depressing for some people. They'd be better off not knowing. And I thought about that. I really thought about that, and I decided no. It is always better to know, and ignorance is never an option. You just have to be stoical, accept the world, accept reality, and there's nothing worse than believing in something that's complete nonsense and being a fool. So I went ahead and kept proselytizing, or whatever they say. And the funny thing is, Christian, I have thousands of emails and messaging over the last few years thanking me for saving their sanity and not having them been duped. So I think I made the right decision. So for me, it's all about awareness. And that's why the censorship laws are coming in, the hate speech, which is an excuse for censorship, 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 censorship. The Online Digital Safety Act. Oh, it's because of porn. It's because of kids. It's because of criminals. All cover stories. All fairy stories. The people at the top don't care about any of those things. In fact, they like drugs because it makes people weaker populations. So all of this censorship is because I believe the oligarchies know they're in a dangerous phase in these years because they worked in the shadows with no scrutiny for decades. But since COVID, they're now out there. And if the people in large enough numbers are openly talking, and if the people no longer are scared of being called a racist or being called an anti-this or an anti-vax or an anti-S, if the people start rightly not caring about those propaganda weaponized slurs, and they insist on just talking openly with references, published material, not weird stuff from Facebook, and people insist on talking, it's going to be very hard to shut the conversation down. And if the conversation keeps growing, the bad guys have a serious problem, I would suggest.
Yeah, you mentioned about big tech and such, and I just wanted to comment among things that I have kind of come to the opinion that some of these big players, whether it's Zuckerberg, which I've heard there's some component of a government agency perhaps playing an invisible hand with Facebook, speculation on that. You think of Google and all these people that are portrayed as they just worked really hard and they did it. And there's like I mentioned on previous episodes, it's kind of like an invisible hand. Yes, the harder you work, you increase your surface area of luck and such, but there are other forces, of course, at play. And how they've been able to usurp and take advantage and want to create issues whereby they can then come in like a BlackRock or fill in the blank to come and pick up assets on the dollar, and leverage these private and government interests.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Epstein, I know it's topical and conspiracy theory, but it was comical to watch what happened there. But I only found out because of that whole thing recently. Someone sent me stuff. I looked into it. I hadn't realized Epstein was a maths teacher, mathematics, and I don't believe a particularly good one. He was a nobody. And next minute, a banking organization connected to, well, as usual, Zionist type political attitudes, came in and suddenly he was running billions of dollars hedge funds and he was a made man. And the rest is history. It's some of the most expensive property in New York. So that's the kind of thing that can happen you that's not to do with hard work, to your point. And if we take Bill Gates, I'll tell you something, Christian, I hope you haven't heard this one, but I find it really interesting. And there's a million examples of this, by the way. But Bill Gates, 25 years ago or so, as a manager and a technology, master technologist, and in the IT world to a large extent, I found it vaguely fascinating how Gates had done so well. Just based on my managerial expertise, I looked at him and said, this is a weak person. This is a person with lots of flaws, and I don't see talent. So I thought, he must have got really lucky, right? And IBM gave him a sweetheart deal for essentially what was stolen software, in a sense. How did that happen? Well, I'll tell you, because Professor Richard Werner, he's pretty famous anyway, I interviewed him and that came up in passing and he smiled and he said, oh, do you not know about Bill Gates and his father? And I said, no. And I knew all about the Rockefellers. I was lecturing on them. And he said, well, Bill Gates Sr. Was the chief counsel for the Rockefellers, the foundation. He was right in there. And I went, ah. And he said, so we all assume young Bill is geeky. We can use young Bill because we need to get in and have big ownership of the computer space, right? So how about we use young Bill? Yeah, good idea. And the rest is history, because the head of IBM at the time was in Planned Parenthood, the kind of eugenics outfit, with Bill Gates Sr. and other Rockefeller people. So it always goes back to the same club. So yeah, a lot of these moguls, you won't always find out, but somewhere along the line they were helped in a mega way, because in the future they would become an important part of the infrastructure. And I'm guessing, I don't know about Zuckerberg, but There's so many examples like Epstein, Gates, and just loads more. Maybe Zuckerberg got lucky. Yeah, who knows? Maybe not.
Yeah, I had Kerry Lutz, who has a great podcast. He was mentioning, I guess, DARPA, which is like some government agency. There's speculation that that they helped to kind of get him going as a means to collect collect user stuff. Any other things that you'd like to dispense or share with the audience, and then of course how people can learn more about you, Ivar?
Oh, no, I think I know, and I absolutely agree and respect that, Christian, that you like to do around 40 minutes, and people don't need huge long ones. So I'm gonna cut it largely. I would just say something we didn't touch on that's very heartfelt from me and very genuine, is to get your family's assets, a portion based, this is not financial advice, but get financial advice and get a portion of your pension or funds or investments, particularly high net worth people, into physical gold, silver, or even platinum, palladium, yada, yada, yada. I won't go into specific percentages or breakdowns. I know mine. I just think it's really, really important with CBDC coming. And, people, there's a free consultation. My last few videos, I have a link in them. If people want to watch some of my videos, generally there's a link there. To a really good outfit in the UK that serve worldwide, who will do free consultations. So I just think it's really important, and I've been increasing my percentage. Only started in December 2020 because COVID made me research a bit and find out where we were heading. And I had a phrase back there, Christian. Believe it's my phrase. I made it up. I said there's only two things you can trust in terms of pension and stuff. Metal and dirt. So precious metals and maybe land is relatively safe, but that was it. And ever since then I've just been increasing position. Obviously I've done very well, but I think there's a long way to go. And as the dollar collapses, the price of the metals doesn't go up. The collapsing paper fiat currency is basically toilet paper, and it's rapidly going down. And the only safe way, I believe, is physical possession of precious metals. I don't know what you think about that one.
Oh, I completely agree, especially what Professor, I think it was Werner, I think I was just listening to him on Tucker Carlson talk about the wonderful fractional reserve banking and how, boy, I could go off, I could just go off on a tangent. I just can't believe how much we've been lied to, how much is obfuscated throughout history. And even currently, it is mind-boggling to me.
It's astonishing, Christian, and it's many years ago actually I discovered Mike Maloney. And if you look up The Secret History of Money, I think it's a 10-part YouTube with professional animations and explains the Fed and how the system works. And it's an absolute Ponzi scheme. Secret History of Money. But yeah, I mean, the good thing about this concept though of metals being so important is you got to be careful. General Patton, I'm a big World War II buff, I watched all the documentaries. Now I found out since that it was quite different than I was told World War II, but we won't get into that. But Patton said if everyone's thinking the same, somebody ain't thinking, and it's the danger of groupthink. But with my very large network of macroeconomics, hedge fund investor types and the Maverick organization, the one thing that's not groupthink but is almost universally accepted as obviously correct is to get large or relatively big chunk into physical metal. I don't know if I've heard anyone really making a coherent case otherwise. It's just, but the tragedy is most ordinary people have no idea because we have been indoctrinated against physical gold, real money, for decades through all the financial institutions and universities. All of them say the same thing. No, pet rock. Oh, barbarous relic. And that has all been basically a psyop. Shocking.
100%. 100%. Ivar, how can people learn more about you and get in touch with you?
All right. Well, I think my YouTube at Ivar Cummins Science. But if you search my name, you'll still actually get my YouTube and X account, which are the main places I use. I don't use the fatemperor.com website as much as I should. But the YouTube, you'll get my latest videos. I get demonetized for obvious reasons here and there. But generally, I and my guests are clever enough to say the stuff without easily getting trapped by the algorithms. So the YouTube and the X, and yeah, I think they're the two main places. I always keep it interesting, I like to think.
Absolutely. Well, Ivar, thanks so much for carving out the time, and looking forward to have you on sometime here in the near future.
Anytime, Christian. Good man. Thank you. That'll do it, folks. Christian's a good guy. Hope you agree. And just a reminder, there's a link down below if you're considering doing the smart thing, particularly if you're higher net worth individual, to be quite honest. With the times that are coming, more important than ever, I believe, to have some portion of your pension or assets safe in physical gold, or particularly silver these days seems to have even more scope for upside. And yeah, I don't know, that's what I've done, and all my friends and colleagues around the world, pretty much very well hedged. So maybe consider that. Until next time, good luck.